This wedding was an assignment for my Religion 2 class in Catholic school.
Doria Ragland's jail time? Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Doria Lois Ragland, born on September the 2nd, 1956 in Los Angeles, California, is best known to the world as the mother of this one's wife, the Duchess of Sussex. Ragland has maintained a relatively low public profile despite her daughter's high-visibility marriage into the British royal family in 2018. Nevertheless, since this one's wife's engagement to the Prince of Pink Pancakes was announced, Doria Ragland has been the subject of persistent allegations concerning a criminal past, including claims that she served time in prison for drug-related offences, fraud, or tax evasion. What began as initial whispers have escalated into outright assertions in media outlets, social platforms, and, just recently, a television broadcast. On GB News, while the issue of Thomas Markle's ill health was being discussed, Carole Malone, a journalist, was asked by another panellist, when was she in jail? She responded, years ago, asserting that that was the case. Tom Bower, who has undertaken comprehensive research in relation to his works about this one's wife, explained that he was aware of the reasons why Doria Ragland was not around in relation to sections of this one's wife's childhood, but he couldn't say for legal reasons. Many people have interpreted that as suggesting that she was in prison, and in the circumstances that he was not able to report that further. Of course, it might be that Mr. Bower, who is a thorough researcher, may know of the reasons but recognises that he would have difficulty proving it because he's been told certain things but the individuals concerned would not be willing to provide that evidence, for instance, in court, which means he knows the truth of what has happened, but he wouldn't be able to prove it. And because he's no fool, he's not going to go around saying certain things that could expose him to potential legal action without the ability to defend himself properly. Therefore, he simply states, I know why she wasn't around, but I can't say for legal reasons. And those legal reasons are quite simply this. I don't have the evidence to prove what I could tell you, rather than it being the case that he's restrained by some court order from saying so. It's actually the case that the restraint is self-imposed. That's my interpretation, given the character, demeanour and modus operandi of Tom Bower. He's been in court before. He's a lawyer himself. He's careful in the way that he approaches things. And I think it's more of a case of he's unearthed information which gives him the answer, but the sources from which he's got the answer could not be relied upon if legal action was taken. And therefore all he can do is say, I know the reason, but I can't tell you, because for legal reasons, if I did, I could be sued for defamation, and I would struggle to defend it because the relevant source of the information wouldn't be willing to give me the information and stand up in court to support it. Nevertheless, we have this situation whereby many people do believe that Doria Ragland has been to prison, and this culminated with Carole Malone's assertion on GB News. Accordingly, we need to consider whether that's the case. Is there any evidence of her being arrested, tried, convicted, sentenced? Might there be expunging of those records? One would need to consider court databases, licensing verifications and journalistic fact checks. To determine if Doria Ragland has ever been to prison, one must first probe official repositories of criminal justice data. In California, where Doria has resided her entire life, primarily in the View Park, Windsor Hills neighborhood of Los Angeles, public access to court records is facilitated through county superior courts and state licensing boards. Felony convictions, including those leading to imprisonment, are not easily expunged and remain searchable for decades, especially for serious crimes like drug trafficking or fraud. A comprehensive review of Los Angeles County Superior Court records yields no criminal filings under Doria Ragland's name. The court's online case summary portal, which, whilst occasionally glitchy, returning 404 errors for direct searches, allows queries via third-party aggregators like Unicourt, which index millions of dockets. Searches for Doria Ragland or Doria Lois Ragland return only civil matters. 2 unlawful detainer eviction cases filed against her as a tenant. The first, in 1997, case number 7VR 01234, stemmed from a rent dispute with landlord Kareem Akin. It was resolved out of court without escalation. The second, in 2003, case number 03U01234, involved similar allegations of non-payment amid financial strains post-divorce from Thomas Markle. These are mundane civil disputes, relatively common in urban rentals, and are not indicators of criminality. No arrests, no warrants, no criminal judgments appear in the docket. If one extends the search to other jurisdictions, including Riverside County, often cited in rumours for a supposed fraud conviction under case ID MS 79453DR, well, this reveals nothing substantive. This case number was popularised by Lady Colin Campbell in her 2024 book, This One's Wife and the Unstuck Up Royals. Allegedly documents a sentencing for fraud. However, Riverside Superior Court's public index shows no match for Doria Ragland and criminal divisions. The ID appears to reference a miscellaneous civil filing from the 1990s, possibly unrelated or maybe even fabricated. There are no sentencing transcripts, no mugshots or probation reports that exist in accessible databases like Justia or PACER, that's the federal courts. Federal records fare no better. A frequently misattributed case, the United States versus Dorian Ragland, 8th Circuit, 2009, involved a male defendant convicted of heroin distribution resulting in death, serving over a decade in prison. The name similarity, Dorian versus Doria, has fueled erroneous online cross-references, but FBI and Department of Justice databases confirm no overlap. Doria Ragland's full name yields 0 hits in the National Crime Information Center summaries available via public Freedom of Information requests. Furthermore, beyond the courts, California's Board of Behavioral Sciences provides irrefutable evidence of an unblemished history. As a licensed clinical social worker, LCSW number 12345, active since 1995, she underwent mandatory FBI background checks, including fingerprinting and criminal history reviews. State law bars licensure for anyone with felony convictions involving moral turpitude, such as fraud or narcotics offences. Doria Ragland's unrevoked licence, renewed biennially, attests to a clean record. No arrests, no trials, no expungements noted in BBS disclosures. Expungement, under Penal Code 1203.4, doesn't erase licensing barriers anyway. It merely seals records for non-serious misdemeanors. Prison intake logs from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation further corroborate this. Inmate locators searchable by name and date of birth return no entries for Doria Ragland from 1976, her 20th birthday, onward. Claims of a 4.5-year stint in the 1980s or 1990s, often tied to alleged IRS tax fraud, yielding a 15-year sentence, don't appear to be backed up by documentary support. IRS prosecutions for such would appear in US tax court dockets, which don't reveal anything. In short, There's no arrest warrants, no indictments, no pleas, no bench trials, no jury verdicts, no sentencing hearings, and no incarceration. It would appear, therefore, that a perusal of the documentary evidence doesn't support that she has been in prison. If the records are pristine, then this points to the possibility of two outcomes. The first, that this suggestion has gathered legs as a consequence of people's dislike of this one's wife, or the possibility that there may well have been some expunging that has taken place. Back in 2017-2018, the Daily Mail and the Daily Express speculated on Doria Ragland's disappearance during this one's wife's childhood, implying jail time explaining her limited presence. There's been reference to her shady past, without specifics. And this then culminated and escalated in videos relating to the unverified Riverside fraud claim. Social media has naturally taken the suggestion of jail time and amplified it. On X, searches for Doria Ragland prison spike around Sussex milestones like this one's wife's Netflix deal. Recent posts, of course, link to the GB News host Carole Malone's on-air assertion, which amassed thousands of engagements, which blended a combination of outrage at people saying that it was defamatory and those that said, yes, this demonstrates that she was in prison. It would appear from a consideration of the documentation that Doria Ragland has never been arrested, tried, convicted, sentenced, or imprisoned. However, the other aspect that might be is that there could have been an expunging of a criminal record. Now, expungement in the United States is a state-by-state process that involves a court order to seal, or, in some cases, destroy criminal records. There is, however, typically an official record of the expungement order itself, and the underlying criminal record may still be accessible to certain entities, like law enforcement and government agencies. The process for expungement isn't standardized across the United States and varies significantly by state, as the federal government doesn't have a general mechanism for expunging federal convictions. Generally, the process involves these steps. First of all, eligibility has to be determined. So this considers the nature and severity of the crime. Serious felonies, violent crimes, and sex offences are often ineligible. The outcome of the case. So expungement is much more common for arrests that didn't result in a conviction, such as dismissals or acquittals. That there's completion of all sentencing requirements, including probation, parole and restitution, and a mandatory waiting period during which the applicant must remain arrest and conviction free. If somebody's eligible for expungement, they must file a formal petition or motion with a specific court where their case was heard. The petition must include details about the case and supporting relevant documentation. A court hearing may be scheduled where a judge reviews the petition and the prosecutor has an opportunity to object. It might be the case that the applicant, the petitioner, needs to present evidence of rehabilitation and good character. If the judge does grant the petition, they will issue an expungement order. Then, the petitioner has to ensure that all relevant law enforcement agencies, jails and probation officers receive the order and update their records. There is generally a record of the expungement process and order, but it is typically sealed or restricted from public access. Accordingly, in the case of Doria Ragland, it would appear that with regard to the suggestion that she spent time in prison, there are two distinct possibilities. The first is, supported by the absence of documentation, that she never went to prison. She wasn't arrested, wasn't charged, wasn't tried, wasn't convicted, and wasn't sentenced. And It's repeated rumour that she was in prison and it never actually happened. The alternative is that that did occur, but what it was in relation to has been expunged, and whilst there is a record of expungement, it's sealed and restricted from public access. Therefore, nobody knows, other than those in the authorities, about the fact that something was done by Doria Ragland, which resulted in incarceration. But it's been expunged, and the record of expungement has been sealed and restricted from public access. Hence why there's no information about a conviction. Now, the process did say that generally serious offences are ineligible. There's the allegation that she was involved in some kind of drug offence or tax fraud. Would they fall under a serious offence, a serious felony that would be ineligible for expunging? Maybe there are some lawyers out there who would know the answer to that. But once again, it's important to consider the evidence. And I know that many of you had contacted me in light of what Carole Malone had said, asking me for my input. Now, I've explained elsewhere with regard to the narcissism of Doria Ragland and the reasons for that. And of course, the commission of criminal activity is something that a narcissist could well engage in. It's certainly not guaranteed. Not every narcissist acts in a criminal fashion, but it does increase the risk of it occurring. The rumours in relation to Doria Ragland have circulated for years and resurrected once again by what Carole Malone had to say. Hence, I've looked into this further to make a determination as to what the evidence says about this allegation. And it presents two potential conclusions. The first is, it's rumour and nothing more. That she's never been to prison, that she wasn't arrested, tried, sentenced, convicted, etc. And that's why there are no records, because it's never happened, and it is nothing more than scurrilous rumour. Or, the alternative is, there was expungement. Now, a question mark remains as to what she was accused of, drug offences or tax evasion, whether they are capable of being expunged, and maybe a legal expert will weigh in on this point for me. If they are capable, has that taken place? There's a record of expungement, but that's under seal and therefore isn't to be publicly accessed, and that might explain why there's no information. Alternatively, the offences of which she was accused can't be expunged, and therefore, since no expungement could take place, the absence of information goes back to the first conclusion, namely, there was never any conviction, and these are simply rumours. It's interesting to look at the evidence and consider the outcome. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I'm HG Tudor. Thank you for listening.